When I started hearing about the beatings, I didn't imagine that they were going to be as gruesome as what I saw.
You know, I was very scared when they accuse you of spying. I mean, that means you're dead.
Two Al Qaeda came, and they were keep telling that I should be beheaded.
سبا مقصد شهید میشیم. دم یکی دو سه روز دیگه چی میکنی؟
We take for granted the pictures we see on our screens. But imagine what's going through the minds of the men and women out there filming them.
These are human remains of prisoners who died from easily treatable diseases.
They witness the horrors, dodge the bullets, and defy oppressive regimes so that we can be better informed. These are some of the strongest pictures of the year, all taken by freelancers. Welcome to Firing Line. Each year we step behind the camera to speak to the people who risk their lives to bring back stories from remote and dangerous places. In this programme we'll be sharing their stories. This year the judges in the Rory Peck Awards have looked through the work of more than 40 camera operators from around the world. Their reports range from being embedded with the Taliban to close-ups of a bomb being defused. And now a look at the finalists and winners. First, to northeastern Afghanistan and the Taliban stronghold of Kunar province. It's a place where few Western reporters have ventured. Norwegian Paul Refsdal embedded with one unit of fighters. He caught unique images of Taliban daily life and operations, but soon found himself held hostage. Rather than show the Taliban simply as ruthless fanatics, Paul sought to portray the men he'd come to know. Ragtag, but dedicated. At times, even funny.
This is a different war report, so to say, because I want to show what really happens as if the camera wasn't there. And it surprises a lot of people, but the Taliban, they have humor.
Ironically, his host, Commander Davran, is more interested in showing Paul their military prowess.
I didn't go to Taliban to film fighting, but I was looking for the everyday life of the Taliban fighters. And part of that life is that nearly every day they were attacking US forces. Davran was a very respectable gentleman, so to say, a fighter from the old school. And he had this sub-commander, Omar, he seemed like the wild thing, you know. He was all the time he wanted to go on ambushes. He had long hair, a big beard, you know, and he was very friendly with me. So I thought, okay, I should follow Davran for a while, and I should follow Omar for a while. I get this kind of two different personalities, both of them representing a part of the Taliban.
Paul spends time with Davran and his family and captures the human side of this Taliban commander.
My favorite scene actually is the commander Davran, the commander of Taliban in this province, sitting with his small children. And this is the man who's been attacking US forces with rage earlier today, and then he's sitting there like a normal father with his children.
We have this, I think, stereotypical image of Taliban. Some of it is probably correct, but some of it is not correct, I think. And just the fact that we're fighting these guys and killing them on a daily basis in the NATO forces, I think it's very valid for a Western audience to see a little more about what's going on there. Their attitudes, how they treat their families, and what they actually do.
US Special Forces launch attacks on the valley, and Paul flees when Davran can no longer guarantee his safety. Davran's wife and 2 of his children are killed when their house is hit. Omar later invites Paul to his home, but within 2 days of arrival, Paul's friendship with Omar takes an ominous turn.
You know, the kidnapping did not start at once. I was received as a guest by Omar, and everything was fine for the first day. The second day, one fighter that I didn't know, he came down, came into the room, and he said that they had information that I was a spy and I should be killed. You know, I was very scared when they accuse you of spying. I mean, that means you're dead. But the moment they start talking about money, you know, this is only business.
Paul was released in the end without a ransom being paid. Not surprisingly, he didn't return to Davran's unit as planned.
Davran is a man I would like to meet again if it's possible. I don't know, he's lost most of his family, you know. 2 of his 3 children, he lost his wife. So I don't know if he's changed, you know. I don't know if he would accept meeting me again. You know, going there with the Taliban was kind of a crash course in a lot of things. I mean, first of all, I was really surprised how human the Taliban fighters were. I mean, I myself, as a journalist, was surprised. Secondly, I learned something about loyalty and greed. I mean, supposedly a friend of mine betraying me just to make money.
Paul's no stranger to conflict. He's covered insurgent movements for more than 20 years and has just published a book.
Well, I think just the fact that he's been in these warrior zones all over the world before, he's a little cowboyish, if I may use that word. And we knew that, but having this practical experience and having this willingness to seek out these areas. So I think he had special qualities that was important for us to even support the project. We couldn't see any other kind of guy that we know that could have done this.
He's now back home in Oslo preparing for his next project and is reflective about his experience.
Of course, you know, that's the if you have this situation where there's really a danger of you losing your life, you will think about your family, you know. You don't really think about, you know, about yourselves too much, but you think about how will this affect them.
Not surprisingly, 3 stories in this year's shortlist come from Afghanistan. Our next finalist is in the news category and takes us to the town of Marja in Helmand province. British cameraman Sebastian Rich has been in the business for more than 30 years, but got more than he bargained for when confronted with a bomb while travelling with the US Marines. During a lull in the fighting in Marja, US Marines try to convince locals it's safe to return to the central market. As Sebastian is filming, one of the local police issues a deadly warning.
Bam! ID.
It's on a nearby roof. Bomb disposal expert Bobby Garza goes in for a closer look. Sebastian makes a snap decision to stay with him.
About 5 or 6 meters away from us, on top of a little cigarette stall, there was a huge colour gas canister. We were later to find out had about 80 to 100 pounds worth of high explosive in it. And as soon as the IED had been identified, everybody vanished like rats up a drain pipe.
It's about 40 pounds of explosives, if not more, with fragmentation. So anyone within the vicinity would catch some frag or get killed.
This guy almost had a Zen-like quality. Everything was very calm, and he exuded a confidence to me that made me feel absolutely calm. But I also knew that if this thing went off, I'd never know about it.
Did you choose to do this?
I did.
You chose to do this?
I did.
Why?
If it's worth saving somebody else's life, then that's what I get from it.
It was something like out of a movie, shall I cut the red wire or the blue wire? And he cut one of the wires and said, oh, it's safe now. So my heart rate went down, and he was just about to move the bomb when he said, oh, no, not quite there yet. The buggers have set another pressure plate. So there was a secondary device, set there to fool the bomb disposal guy. But he spotted the second pressure plate and got that out. I still don't really know why I stayed with him, but the feeling I had at the time was that he was the loneliest man on the planet with the worst job in the world.
Give me a sense of what you feel as you do this incredible job.
Clarity. Interesting enough, it's absolute clarity. Very thin case, but very effective for blast, secondary fragmentation. Very dangerous, to say the least.
It's two human beings knowing that they could die in a millisecond. But somehow that seemed to be okay. We're two men who had never met before. Would possibly share the same fate.
When inter-ethnic violence erupts in Kyrgyzstan last June, more than 400 people die and thousands of homes are destroyed. Making his way to Osh City, British freelance Robin Forestier-Walker manages to document the chaos of the period and the individual tragedies. In Osh, Robin finds a city in turmoil. On one side of the front line are Uzbek neighbourhoods blocked off by makeshift barricades. On the other, the military and areas controlled by Kyrgyz mobs.
We didn't know what to expect when we landed, but we were the first camera crew team in to arrive just within 24 hours of this all starting. Everything had been shut down, everything had come to a grinding halt. Agriculture had stopped, trade, transport networks were blocked, and there were power cuts. It was like a city under siege.
Travel between Uzbek and Kyrgyz-controlled areas is extremely dangerous.
There was great difficulty in traveling around. The information was conflicting, there were all kinds of rumors. What we did know is that armed gangs, militias, possibly the military and the police and mobs were rampaging across the Osh city and Osh area. We could hear a lot of gunfire, and we never knew quite what was around the corner. I didn't know whether snipers were going to be shooting at me or not when I pointed my camera up an alleyway. I didn't know whether another military vehicle was going to come around the corner and open fire on our vehicle. But you just carry on. I think it's just that natural curiosity, that inquisitiveness, and that desire to keep pressing the record button and to keep filming.
In an Uzbek neighbourhood in the centre of the city, rows of houses have been systematically destroyed. Robin comes across a horrifying scene.
The buildings, the burnt out structures, the crumbling ash bones on the floor of a room where an old man had been too old to escape the flames.
Beside the elderly man's charred remains, all that's left, a pair of crutches.
It was like a horror movie that I was in, but somehow when I'm holding my camera, I feel aloof from it. I feel perhaps under a false sense of security that I'm protected from it. I'm just observing what's happening. It was absolute chaos. And what we were getting in the first few days were stories, and terrible stories, from people on the run, escaping the violence. And there were all kinds of atrocities that these people claimed were being committed.
A local mosque becomes a makeshift hospital. It's here that Robin learns of more atrocities.
We asked about rape allegations, and the doctor began to tell us what she and her staff had encountered over those last few days.
They raped 5-year-old girl.
We raped a 5-year-old girl.
Girl, 5 years old. 5 years old, the girl raped. I can't.
The translator turned away from the camera and was so visibly upset, and then I then turned back to the doctor, and she was sobbing.
Robin also finds a new cemetery where funerals are underway, and there's one image that haunts him to this day.
We stopped at a funeral that actually in the past this place had just been a grass field, and now it had become a new cemetery. And while I was there, at least 3 or 4 bodies were brought in and buried, and the one that perhaps will stay with me is the young boy of 15 whose father was there, and his friends had carried the coffin in, and I asked to see the body. I wanted to see what had been done to the body, and they unwrapped the shroud and they showed me. And he'd been shot in the chest at relatively close range by a shotgun because of the pattern of pellet marks, and he probably had died, I hope, quite quickly. But so young, just a young boy, just caught up in it, like so many of the people. We knew that it wasn't just ordinary Uzbek against Kyrgyz man. It's still a mystery who precisely was behind it, who gave the orders, who organized it. And I think that the most important thing to come out of this is that we were there, that we were able to bring attention to the wider world quite what was going on in this rather ignored, isolated part of the former Soviet Union that will become extremely important in the coming years.
Now to southern Africa and Zimbabwe, where Robert Mugabe's party has all but smothered any independent media. Most are forced to go undercover, like Features finalist Hopewell Chinono, whose brave coverage of post-election violence for Kenyan TV exposes the brutality of those trying to crush opposition supporters. Hopewell captures these graphic images of what he calls Zimbabwe's dark chapter, even though he's been declared a state security risk and barred from covering the election.
There were times when I had to pretend that I was a medical doctor in order for me to get into a hospital and film the victims of violence. There were times when I had to pretend that I was working for the government in order for me to get into the farms and not be victimized.
Popo will do whatever it takes to get the story, and I think he did that in this film. He actually braved, you know, the possible persecution from the state to get these images.
It was really difficult moving around the country. It was even more difficult staying in your own house. There were times when you had to stay with friends because you were not so sure whether they would come after you.
But Hopewell does travel, talking to victims around the country. He finds the homes of Morgan Tsvangirai's opposition supporters burnt to the ground, and violence being used wholesale to punish and subjugate.
There are moments when, you know, I would break down and cry when I'm going through the footage again, when I'm digitizing the footage. And then I'd realize, you know, oh my God, this is what I've got. Some of the stuff I couldn't put in the film because it was too gruesome. And, you know, there are times when I had to argue with my editor.
I had never seen anything like it before. The images that we had seen of Zimbabwe had just been of people wounded, bandaged up, but this stuff went above and beyond. It was really, really gruesome and really graphic. But you cannot pile it on and just show violence for the sake of violence. We had to draw the line somewhere.
As the violence escalates, the family of Harare's former mayor is beaten, including his 80-year-old father.
As a human being, there's an element in you which says, you know, say, I'm really sorry about what happened to you, but you also want not to interfere with the story, so you let them, you know, calm down and let it out.
Hundreds of people are killed and several thousand displaced by the violence. Age is no protection. Fear is everywhere.
We are feeling death. Why they don't just come and help us here in Zimbabwe? We are living under threat.
Zimbabweans were fighting back, and that in itself tweaked my conscience to say, you know, what am I going to do to let the rest of the world know what's happening in the country? Should I just walk away from the story, or should I, you know, film what's happening so that the rest of the world knows? What keeps me going is the fact that, you know, the people who are victims of this violence, who have been beaten up, have got this resilience to carry on.
And now to the winner in the news category. American Roger Arnold picks up the award in front of a packed audience in London. His compelling images of the clashes in Bangkok between Thai government forces and the red shirt protesters are unrivaled.
What Roger Arnold did, and I think he did it uniquely, was got really down to eye level with both sides of the protests. There was a real intimacy about what he did, and it made it very vivid and alive. And for me, it was the best coverage I saw anywhere of the Thai protests.
Roger shoots stills and video as he chronicles the final events unfolding right on his doorstep. Thousands of protesters have pitched camp in the centre of Bangkok. 2 months of peaceful protests are turning violent.
I could walk to the front line every day. I mean, I could walk in and out of the camp and go home and grab lunch and walk back in or whatever.
The almost carnival-like atmosphere is broken. One of the red shirt leaders, a former general in the Thai military, is gunned down. Roger had interviewed him a week earlier.
By May 13th, Major General Khattias Suwistapol was shot right there by a sniper. At that point, everything just degenerated, and it became very, very violent after that, especially here.
The next day, soldiers shoot into the crowd of protesters. Roger narrowly escapes getting hit by gunfire.
I was walking with the red shirts here because things had calmed down, but I knew I needed to get some compelling footage, and I knew it was a really dangerous place to be, but I needed a full element. So I just put the camera on, and you can see in the video, as I'm walking through there, all of a sudden you'll hear in the background, pow. And then by the second one, the red shirts start to realize that we're under fire, and everybody starts to run for cover.
Roger keeps the camera rolling as a man close by goes down. He's been shot in the head.
I kind of turned around and immediately put the camera on him, and you could see his friends running to him, and he's laying there in a pool of blood. But I stayed there behind the buses at that point. And unfortunately, my tape ran out right in the middle of that sequence. I don't know if I dealt with it emotionally. I just remember being terrified. I mean, just because I didn't know where the gunfire had come from, who had shot him. I mean, I assumed that it had come from the Army, but, you know, since I never saw any of the actual gunmen that were involved in that shooting, as far as I can tell, I don't know how he got hit.
Roger navigates both sides of the conflict to get the full picture.
I had spent a lot of time with the red shirts down at that end of the road, but then when I came on this side of the road, I took up positions back around here behind the soldiers where they had one of their sandbag positions and just kind of shot down the road. And it was just like a total ghost town. I just turned the camera and you could see smoke billowing up from the red shirts front line where they had set a lot of tires on fire. And this road had no activity whatsoever. It was just you know, a lot of gunfire going on.
On May the 19th, the conflict comes to a head. Roger jumps on a motorbike and returns to the main intersection near his home, where so much violence has occurred. When the security forces make their final assault on protesters, Roger follows them in. The red shirts make their last stand amid sporadic exchanges of gunfire. Roger provided comprehensive coverage of those final days, with images that told the story from both sides.
It was a tragedy for the country, and it was difficult to watch. Difficult to report, difficult to be a part of, but still very interesting to be a part of. I mean, very compelling. I always wanted to be out there.
At the end of the 2-month protest, 2 journalists had been killed and 9 injured, 2 of them Roger's friends. They're among this year's Rory Peck Trust beneficiaries, Canadians Nelson Rand and Chandler Vandergrift.
A lot of people have said that the journalists were targeted by one side or the other, and I personally don't believe that. I don't think that happened. I just think they either got unlucky or were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I don't think either side ever targeted journalists. That's just my opinion, though.
As we've seen, the risks in this business are very real. The number of journalists and media support workers who are killed and injured grows every year. Before we go to the rest of this year's winners, let's take a quick look at the Rory Peck Trust, which runs the awards. They were founded in the name of a British freelance killed by crossfire in Moscow in 1993. His memory lives on through the trust, which works on behalf of freelance camera operators who don't have the safety net of a big organisation when things go wrong. Canadian Nelson Rand is one of this year's beneficiaries. A close friend of news winner Roger Arnold, Nelson was nearly killed in Bangkok while covering the crackdown on the red shirt protesters. With the help of the Rory Peck Trust, Nelson was quite literally able to get back on his feet. On the other side of town from Roger, Nelson is with the Thai army, filming for French TV as soldiers try to clear protesters from one of Bangkok's main roads. In the middle of a gun battle, he decides to cross to the red shirt side to get a closer look. His friend John Sanlin stays with the military and captures the moment he's shot. Nelson is on the right.
I took a risk, a calculated risk, and I decided I'll cross the street. And as I crossed the street, I got shot, first in my hand. I think my camera fell down. I was screaming.
Help me! Help me!
In the chaos, Nelson's camera is still rolling.
I remember trying to take cover up against the park wall on the other side of the street. And as I was down, I was shot in the leg.
One journalist gets shot.
The second bullet hits his femoral artery and Nelson is bleeding profusely.
I was screaming for help, and a protester came, literally crossed the street under gunfire, grabbed me and dragged me to safety.
The protester who helps rush him to hospital saves his life.
He's sitting right here on where he was shot. Yeah.
Roger had been on the phone with Nelson just a few minutes earlier. The two friends often spoke, sharing information.
How are you?
Good, how are
you? Yeah? Is this your new car?
Yeah.
I had just talked to Nelson just before he was shot, just to find out where he was and what was going on where he was, because I knew Nelson usually tend to find the sharp end of things.
But I thought we are crossing here,
This is the first time Nelson has visited the scene of the attack. The other cameraman, John Sandlin, is there helping him piece together what happened.
No, it went in there.
Yeah.
Out there. And then there's my scar.
Nelson was hit by 3 bullets. His recovery has been slow but steady. The Rory Peck Trust has given Nelson a grant to pay for his physiotherapy, and he says he's forever thankful.
For me, no health insurance, no health benefits, and you're injured on the job. There's really very little help you can get, and the Rory Peck, I think, fills an important gap for freelancers.
And now to the rest of the winners. First, the features category. Let's see what caught the judges' eyes.
I thought the Najibullah film was fantastic, and it really did represent everything the Rory Peck Trust is about. It was fantastic access. It was journalistically really sound, and he shot it beautifully, and so from the very beginning I thought this was a top contender.
The winner in the features category obtained rare access to radical Islamic factions in Afghanistan. They're targeting NATO's supply routes running through the troubled Kunduz and Baghlan provinces. Najibullah Qureshi spent 9 tension-filled days with extremist groups known to have close links with Al-Qaeda. He then had to flee for his life.
Another British casualty caused by an IED.
This weekend, the Prime Minister promised more help in detecting roadside bombs.
The biggest killer of coalition troops in this war. The bombs that are taking 3 out of 4 British and American lives.
Despite the insurgents' reservations, Najibullah finds himself filming unprecedented footage. At a secret hideout, they're planning attacks.
It
was dark at the first. I was asking the Uzbek guy, because he was the boss. He was the professional guy who make the IEDs for them. And also he was teaching Afghans. My camera was on like that, and I was asking the Uzbek guy, please allow me to film. He was saying, no, don't, you're not. I was telling, please a second. He said, no allowed. just this wire. He said, no, just this powder. He said, not at all. It will harm us. Don't do this. You are not allowed to film anything. But I was still filming. They were a giant group, which I saw Talib, Hizb Islami, Arab, Chechens, Uzbek. So they were all joined together. Their aim is one thing, to fight NATO.
ما بسیار مجاهدای خاص از خارجم برای ما پیش ما میاد ولی خب ما اجازه نداریم که پیش تو و هر کدامش تا منگه در بخیو.
Najibullah films the routine of daily life as the insurgents prepare for an operation. Then he accompanies them on the attack and learns en route that the target is the main road used by US and NATO forces.
I feel really nervous, frightening, and because I was the middle of them and the middle of NATO and Afghan forces.
But for the insurgents, not everything goes as planned. When their bomb fails to detonate, they fire a rocket. The police shoot back.
I was really happy that the bomb didn't blow up. I said maybe I'm lucky today, because I was really worrying if they blew up something, because they had planned to block the road and then to fight against the police and NATO forces. Then I thought it's going to be really dangerous, and several people will killed here, plus me probably. Then they were blaming each other.
ما نمیشه با قرآن چی؟ هر روز همی تو پچک کده میرم یه چیکار پینیست. با بیام اولی چیزا داشتکان راتی رو متاس بخورم خوش.
ولا کنه نصبر طبعا.
چه خوی نمیره همی تاس نظر دیر نیستی اون منوش راکسن اولا. آباد از برا خدا مخابره را خراب کرد. بعد چی کنم مال خو استادش هستی بو طرف دادم لقت که کار نکرد خودش. تو مخابره برای گرفت الله اکبر ما. کجا چی دیس؟ دیدی؟ گرم نمیکنه. بین.
Back at the insurgent camp, a chilling moment for Najibullah as the fighters start to suspect he's a spy.
اگر حساب جات دعوت شدن اتمامتون به خط اول اشتراک نکنید وش او خبودی که ما په حساب فلم په حساب جات که مثلا یا راکیه که په څنګه د سپکم خاط صحیح وظیفه انجام نه کړم معلوم نه باشه بدل.
Two top Al-Qaeda guys came from the south. One was Arab and one was from Pakistan. And they told Mirwais, the senior commander, that why he allowed a journalist to film the camp. And then they told Mirwais that I should be beheaded. Mirwais came to me. He said, see brother, I invited you here as Afghani culture, as Islamic culture, and I have to protect you. When Mirwais put me in a minibus, so when he told me the last sentence, go and to not come back again, this was the really big message for me. Any journalist, if they get offered something like this, which no one done it before, of course, first they excited. Like me, I was really excited to get the offer. But when I went there, I saw the dangerous points. And then I had no choice. I had to carry on my work, which I did.
Najibullah Qureshi.
It's the second time in his career that Najibullah has been up to the podium to accept a Rory Peck Award. This year, he dedicates his win to the thousands of Afghans who've lost their lives in the war. And British director and cameraman Nick Reed picked up the coveted Sony Professional Impact Award for his harrowing film on the slum children of Mumbai.
It was the Mumbai world seen through the eyes of the children. It was their story, and he really took the time to get to gain the trust of the children, and he more or less dissolved with his camera into the slums, so he could really show what their lives were.
Nick captures moving and intimate portraits of young lives in desperate poverty. The frenetic and filthy streets of an overcrowded Mumbai. This is a city to which scores of homeless Indian children flock every day. And it's very different from the Oscar-winning movie Slumdog Millionaire. Nick embeds himself here, hoping to capture the unvarnished reality of the real slumdogs.
It was important to me to offer a counterpoint to the movie in a way, because it's a fable, the movie. It's a fantastic, extraordinary, wonderful fairy tale, but obviously it's idealized, it's fantasized. And I think it's quite easy sometimes to overlook the fact that these kids are out there, and they're out there in their millions in India. Finding the right children was quite a task, because it was only appropriate to work with some of them. And so we eventually ended up putting in a lot of mileage on the streets, and I would guess I met about 300 or 400 before we got to the first 3 children.
Deepa's just 7 years old and sells flowers to help feed her family. A day's work earns her only a few coins. Working with his co-producer Batul Mukhtiar, it takes weeks to win their trust. Nick then decides to shoot with minimal camera gear in a non-invasive style.
Right from the outset, we knew we wanted to try and get to their level. So, I mean, perhaps you'll notice that I deliberately kept the camera very low. I wanted to keep the camera in their perspective.
Like Deepa, the twins, Hussein and Hussan, come from one of the city's toughest slums, the Pipeline slum.
My favourite sequence in the film, I guess, is the sequence with the twins and them jumping into the canal, because this is this fantastic joy and energy that come from these boys in this landscape of utter squalor. And the filming, it was exceptionally difficult. I mean, it was absolutely chucking it down with rain, and so I guess I'm quite proud of the sequence as well, of just having got it and got the camera back in one piece.
Salam ran away from home and travelled more than 1,000 kilometres to Mumbai's Victoria station alone. This is where Nick finds him. Salam has been taken in by 20-year-old Asif and his gang. They've introduced him to drugs.
We were genuinely and very worried about Salam. We understood that he'd gone away with 2 of the older boys, one of them Asif, and there were rumours that we'd heard from 4 or 5 sources that there was sexual abuse going on.
When Asif reappears, the team call the police.
बोलता बेटी छुड़ा देगा तुम लोग को, हम लोग को बेटी सब छुड़ा देगा। मारो मारो गलत चौकी लगा, गलत चौकी लगा।
It's a difficult moment there to be calling the police and obviously to be crossing that invisible line. But our main interests were for the welfare of Salam, and you know, as humans, let alone as filmmakers, we were very concerned about him. We set up a website for the program. The night it went out, over 30,000 people logged on. We raised £50,000 in total for these young people, but they were just the tip of the iceberg. So there are thousands, millions, some would say, of those kids out there. They're still there. The four we found, I guess, were the lucky ones because we've been able to do something for them since. I'll never forget them. They touched me, and I'd like to think that they won't forget us either.